Hey, what's up guys, Rev here. I have gotten a mountain of requests to respond to this video uploaded by Vice News yesterday. Now you can read the title for yourself. It's pretty obvious what they're going for here. And before we get into this video, I really just want to establish some ground rules here. So I've seen people absolutely up at arms, very angry about this video, calling it like a piece of propaganda and spreading misinformation about this topic. And I've also seen people celebrating this video like it's some epic win against the lolicons and a sign of their downfall. I want to remind both sides here that we're talking about a video uploaded by Vice News, okay? Vice is not some arm of the American legislature or that of any other country. They're not some law enforcement agency. They're a journalist agency, okay? Like, they don't hold that much power. Maybe like 15, 20 years ago when they were actively going into war zones and doing crazy things like that, maybe there was some respect to be given to Vice News, but not now, because this is the kind of stuff they do. And clearly over the past couple of years, they've made it very clear that they have these sorts of feelings towards the manga industry, anime, and just Japan in general. Okay, so instead of dissecting this whole 16.5-minute video, I think it's worth our time to just go through some of the key highlights of this video and really just go over how much misinformation is spread in this video, the complete bias of its structure, and really this whole thing is just a giant hit piece on the manga industry, and you'll see why short enough. So let's look at this first part that I think covers really the general attitude of a lot of people in Japan and people outside of Japan who defend this sort of content. Quality material back there. I mean, the whole argument of no victims is something that nobody can deny. Because, of course, the next logical step for anybody offended by this stuff is to say, well, it leads people to be attracted to children and it encourages abuse. But unfortunately, as you'll see, not just in this clip, but throughout every part of this video, the people who claim there's a connection can't point to any sort of study or any sort of intrinsic link. It's always just how they feel or what they think based on their own experiences, but it's not something they can actually demonstrate through any sort of evidence.
Anime superfan, and also one of the artists creating comics that show child pornography.
That's the whole problem. I mean, on Twitter, for example, like the realm we're used to, a lot of the disgust and push to ban or outlaw this sort of material is based on personal objections. And as I always say on my channel, every single time we talk about this topic, whether it's lolicon, shotacon, or anything like that, your personal disgust is valid. It's perfectly fine to be disgusted by this sort of content, but your personal objections are not to be valued as the same as scientific evidence or studies. It's not the same. And acting on those personal objections really leads people into a corner where they're just defending themselves based on how they feel in a way they can't really articulate other than just screeching pedophile on Twitter or something like that. You know what I mean?
Japanese lawmakers agree with artists like Shinji. In the US, just owning a magazine with animated child porn can get you up to 15 years in prison and label you a sex offender for life.
No. I mean, like, this is the part I really wanted to include, that last sentence. It didn't have much to do with his part, but I just wanted to include that. They literally just completely misrepresented US law. So if you've been on this channel long enough, I'm sure you're familiar with the federal codes that control this sort of thing. And the key word when it comes to illustrations is the term indistinguishable. The fictional content must be indistinguishable from a real-life child. None of this stuff, even looking on the screen right now, none of this stuff is indistinguishable from a real life child. If you don't have schizophrenia, you can see the difference. And the fact that they just say that is so irresponsible. Like I said, this seems like it's like an auntie from Twitter made this video and wrote this script. It's like absolutely no research. It's totally a completely unfair generalization of this whole topic. The fact that I could hop in my car right now, drive down to the local Barnes & Noble, and purchase manga off their shelf that contains lolicon blows this whole argument in its face. When do you see people actually arrested for any of this stuff? The only relevant cases that have ever had someone actually arrested for consuming this content in the US involve people who were on parole, where their parole was that they couldn't consume any sort of pornography. And it just so happened that pornography was manga. It's not that it was illegal, it was that they violated their parole in the process. And people, of course, love to cite those cases like, yep, this stuff's illegal in the US. No, it's not. Unless it falls under that indistinguishable category, which, surprise, surprise, it virtually never does. So here's another clip. This one is really, it speaks for itself.
There are no studies that prove animated child porn leads to actual assault. What we do know from police data,
but they're going to
is that
claim it
Japan
does.
is facing a child abuse crisis. More and more children are becoming victims of pornography on social media.
So they're citing these from Japan. And look, nobody here is trying to act like Japan's some place immune from crime. It's some utopia. They have their problems, and they have their problems with sexual abuse of minors. But I think the irony is they're doing a lot better than most countries, and I think that's not taken into effect. And the fact that it's rising, why is your first thought towards manga? It's such a weird connection. But you're going to see where they're going.
For abusing minors.
More adults being arrested doesn't necessarily mean also that there's more crimes being committed. It just means that more people are being caught doing it. It's being policed harder. Keep that in mind as well.
Takashi Kato was once a massive consumer of this pornographic manga. He was also a serial child sex abuser.
その時は3歳か4歳の幼女に対して最初の加害です。
Kato agreed to speak to us because he says he wants to stop others from preying on children. He says he's assaulted at least 11 kids, including abusing girls in public, teaching.
So you'll see in this, like, people are not just in this video, but people on Twitter are taking, like, the word of this convicted pedophile as, like, the gospel. They're respecting his words like he's some wise sage because he feels bad about abusing a countless number of kids because he's saying something that aligns with their agenda. It's really gross, and you're going to see why their point, their argument they're getting out of this is completely flawed.
Boys to masturbate and paying children for sex abroad.
When and how did you realize that you had a sexual desire for children?
中学生の時です。子供を見てすごいワクワクしたりとか、大学生の時にポルノ雑誌を見て、でポルノ雑誌の中に男児を性虐。
So then he goes on from this point to explain his crimes and going forward. But if you listen to what he was saying, he already had this attraction to young children by the time he was in middle school, still had it when he was in college, and then started consuming manga at that point. He was already afflicted by this attraction and then bought the manga. And honestly, this is a very gruesome and tough conversation to have, I understand. But I would much rather someone with this propensity to be consuming fictional content than to be seeking out actual children. Unfortunately, in this case, he was doing both. But that doesn't make some sort of a great argument that manga is the reason he's doing this. It really disturbs me, and I know a lot of other people, when you have an individual like this who's a convicted pedophile, and they're focusing on the tools more than the actual actions of the offender. This is the person who deserves the most blame. He's trying to clear up his image. He's here in his little sweater looking all prim and proper for his interview, but we all forget this man abused countless children. And he's trying to save face and blame it on something. That's something that you should really pay attention to. He has an image to protect. He wouldn't sit here on TV in this video in front of potentially millions of people to just admit guilt and take personal responsibility. He has an agenda here, just like Vice News does. But I want to end with, I think, the best summation of the real attitude, especially within the Japanese legislature towards this, and really one that's shared among people outside of Japan as well. And we'll just give it a listen.
漫画に影響があるんではなくて、そもそもそういう行為が犯罪として存在してるんですよ。漫画があろうとなかろうと。
Minoru Ogino is an elected Tokyo official. He's also a manga artist.
この漫画は児童の性虐待につながるというふうに口を揃えてるぐらいに言ってるんですよね。この意見に関してはどう思われる？
そもそも犯罪者を犯罪に走らせるに足るだけの科学的な根拠がないっていうこと。国が法律としてとか規制として行うときには科学的な根拠ってないといけないんですよ。
And I think it's fair too, as they pointed out, these crimes happen regardless of manga existing or not. Here's the thing, we're pointing the finger at Japan and acting like it's some atrocity of a center of all of the abuse of children in the world. Meanwhile, they make up the tiniest fraction of the worldwide collection of abuse against children. And we're acting like manga is the leading cause of all of this. Meanwhile, there's a big world out there where these things are happening in places where manga has never even touched.
多くの国々では倫理的な観点から規制をしております。なぜ日本はこういう
The moral reasons.
そこにはやっぱりその国の文化とか価値観とか、そういろんな風俗とかいろんなものがやっぱ多少やっぱ関わっているかなと思います。例えば同性愛とかそういったものの描写が違法な国もありますから、それはもう国によってとか国民主義ですから。
And it's democracy whether you like it or not. And people have to respect what some cultures think is acceptable or not. And these things can offend other places, but that's okay. That's the whole point. And people don't really respect that. It's not as simple as, oh, the Japanese want to have these lewd illustrations. This is so important to them. No, it's about what their culture values in terms of free speech and what they think is acceptable or not, or what harms people or doesn't. But I could go on for days and days about this, but I want to make one thing clear. It is, again, it's completely understandable to be uncomfortable with this topic, to find what I'm saying to be weird or gross. I don't really care. I just feel like there's absolutely no real justification proven by any sort of study or real concrete evidence to suggest that manga is somehow leading to the abuse of children, especially on some worldwide scale, traced all back to manga. Okay? That's the problem here. And the overgeneralizations made by this Vice News video here is a problem. And it's a problem that we're seeing. They're basically milking all of the current hate wave against this type of content. And I didn't really point this out. I completely forgot this. Check this out. This tells you what kind of a discussion they want to have. They didn't want any sort of blowback. They didn't want anyone disagreeing with this stuff. They turned off the comment section. That really tells you how sincere they are about this. And if you go to any Vice video, including other videos talking about child abuse, the comments are on. So the fact that they turned it off for this video in particular, right from the moment it was uploaded, tells you exactly how sincere they were about having a dialogue about this very controversial topic. But honestly, that's going to do it for this video. Like I said, it's okay to feel uncomfortable, but let's have an honest and real discussion instead of letting our emotions and what we find personally distasteful take over. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time.